Bellamy ball is crazy, but how did he get a system with 2 false nines, 2 right backs and unproven players to work seamlessly and brilliantly? The two 4-4-2 systems used by Bellamy against Montenegro and Turkey were similar but very different at the same time. For example, the 4-4-2 against Turkey had 2 false nines, and that's a really good place to start with this really clever tactic. This system really relied on Danny Ward's short distribution, something that a lot of people had questioned going into this game. So when Danny Ward was on the ball, the centre-backs often split into wider areas to make the pitch as big as possible, and to also allow the full-backs to move up 5 or 10 yards, also in wide areas. But most importantly, Ethan Ampadu would always be ready to receive the ball. And with the centre-back splitting, Ampadu dropping in to receive the ball, it meant that a lot of the Turkey players were then dragged into the central area of the pitch to try and win the ball back high up the pitch. But the reason that the full-backs weren't involved in build-up is because Bellamy wants them to be involved in the second phase of play, meaning that they don't really get on the ball when Danny Ward is in possession. It's more so going wider to receive the ball after the first pass has been made. This is because a central pass in the first phase often invites opposition players towards the ball, and then this means the secondary spaces are always going to be out wide, and this is where Bellamy wants the ball in the second phase. But what happens in the third phase? And this is a great example of how it works. Ampadu is on the ball and a lot of the Turkey players have converged onto him, but that's not a problem. Because look at where Nico Williams is, look at where Ben Davies is. They're both ready to receive the ball and play around that press from Turkey. This principle was actually visible against Montenegro as well, but in a slightly different way, and we'll touch on that next. But the most interesting part about the system against Turkey is the 2 false nines, Aaron Ramsey and Harry Wilson, because this absolutely bamboozled the Turkey defenders. With Harry Wilson and Aaron Ramsey being players that like to drop deep to receive the ball, it often left the Turkey defenders without anyone to man mark, and you can see how that affected their defensive line. Some of them were stepping up, some of them were dropping deep. And it meant that the defensive line was often fractured, which left secondary spaces for the wingers, which was also an important part of how Wales played. And this is how the gaps began to form. Joe Rodon had the ball here in a set-piece situation, a dead ball, something that should be bread and butter for defenders. But Aaron Ramsey's positioning as a false nine meant that he had the license to drop deep, meaning that Soyuncu was then left without anyone to mark. Meanwhile, Turkey's left-sided centre-back has already been attracted towards Harry Wilson, which left this space here. In hindsight, Soyuncu probably should have done that as well, because Aaron Ramsey then got on the ball and was able to play this first-time pass into a wide area. And Turkey had no idea this was going to happen. But 2 players in particular did. Harry Wilson and Brennan Johnson. As you can see, they've already made the move before Ramsey has even finished the pass. But there's one player who deserves a special mention after that Turkey game. A man who has never really found his spot in the Wales team, Soba Thomas. This freeze frame encapsulates his performance perfectly. The ball hasn't even reached his feet yet, and he's already facing the opposition goal, and he wants to target them, and he wants to be positive, and he wants to drive. His directness was such a useful tool against Turkey. Wales created a total of 4 big chances against Turkey. Soba Thomas was responsible for 50% of them, too. Even here, you can see he was very direct. Even when he didn't have space to drive into, he would always look for the forward ball. Despite having lateral options to his right, he went for the difficult pass and executed it perfectly. But this exact moment in the 42nd minute maybe demonstrates why Soba is way more important to this team than a lot of people may think. Because as you can see here, if I zoom in, Soba checks his run, meaning the defender thinks he's going to go down the line, but he actually checks inside and stops that run, creating a bit more space for him to get the ball, take a touch, and see what options he has. And the reason the Turkey defender has already anticipated the run and also covered it so early is because at this point he was terrified by Soba. He had the better of him every single time. But there's so many moving parts in this one freeze frame. For example, Jordan James takes advantage of the Turkey right back's poor positioning and makes a run into the channel where the space has been left wide open. But sometimes there are problems when your centre midfielder does this, because he was playing in a 2 with Ampadu, and if one of the 2 midfielders makes this type of run, it can leave you exposed or without options in build-up. But it's not actually a problem in Bellamy's system, because Nico Williams has already stepped into a central area to cover Jordan James and is now a midfield option. And the use of Nico Williams in this game is really interesting when you see what Bellamy did with him in the second game, because it was totally different. But back to why Soba was so crucial. You see here, when he gets the ball, Jordan James has already made the run, is already in space. But also the centre-backs of Turkey have already dropped off to defend the space because they're terrified of the ball in behind. But the ball's not actually going in behind because Wales have got 2 false nines in Ramsey and Wilson. And look how much space they've got. There was nobody marking them the entire game. But the false 9 tactic didn't stay against Montenegro, and we saw Kiefer Moore, or Clefer Moore as the stadium announcer pronounced it. But you also had Nico Williams playing again in this game, but in a completely different role. And before the pitch succumbed to the weather, you could really see what the plan was from Bellamy, and it was really different. Because despite starting the game as a right midfielder, his role was way more complex than that, because his role was crucial in what Connor Roberts was being instructed to do. Connor Roberts was really inverted at times, meaning he was playing on the same lateral line as Ethan Ampadu. Despite Ollie Cooper being his midfield partner on paper, he was actually way further forward. And in possession, Wales actually did something that I never thought I'd see us do, and that was play with a 3-2-5. Because when Connor Roberts stepped into midfield to partner Ethan Ampadu, Ben Davies from the left tucked in to make a back three of him, Rodon and Mepham. But with Ben Davies stepping in centrally, Connor Roberts inverted, where was the space? And that's where Nico Williams comes in. Because an important part of Nico Williams' performance was how much width he offered on the right hand side. Because him providing the width and pretty much standing on the touchline throughout the game meant that Connor Roberts had the freedom to step inside without Wales sacrificing any width, still making the pitch as big as possible. But it's not a 3-2-5 all the time. In possession it might be, but out of possession it's a 4-4-2, and the 4-4-2 is crucial in how Wales operate when they don't have the ball. Because with the 4-4-2, Wales have got two strikers ready to press the opponent's centre-backs. Kiefer Moore is already on the left centre-back here and is forcing an issue. Meanwhile, Harry Wilson hasn't fully committed, and there's a reason for that you'll see later on. But he's already there and close enough to press if needs be. But this bank of four in the midfield is the most important part, because it's slightly narrow, meaning that's very hard to play directly through it, or you've got to be a really good player to play through it. And Montenegro fell victim to this press, because Ollie Cooper picked up the ball, and because of Harry Wilson's positioning that we spoke about earlier, he was ready to receive the ball. Harry Wilson's awareness in this situation, by the way, is phenomenal. You can even see here, he makes a look over his shoulder to check how much space he's got. The answer, loads. And after one or two passes, the ball falls to him here. And when the arm goes up and the leg draws back, you know it's over. Because Harry Wilson is one of the best strikers of the ball we've got in the squad. And if the ball falls to anyone, I want him to be him. Harry Wilson in the central area seems very important to this team. And personally, I'm a huge fan of it. His performances in a Wales shirt over the last year have gone massively under the radar in my opinion. And he deserves a lot more credit than he gets. And this could really end up being his team. But importantly, it's Bellamy's coaching that's allowed this to happen. And it's been, 2 games and we're already really excited. Just think of how much more we could get out of this team with a few more weeks, few more months of coaching, more contact time. By the end of the Nations League, I think we'll be very happy with how it's all turned out. Cross fingers we are.